are always asked, what is the most frightening thing you ever experienced in your work?
Beardos, weirdos, boils and ghouls. Something very different. Very, very different. Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, it's pretty much impossible at this point to be involved in the paranormal community in any capacity without knowing who Ed and Lorraine Warren are. When it comes to paranormal investigators, there is no one more famous, no one more iconic than Ed and Lorraine Warren. They've been involved in some of the biggest historical hauntings in the United States and the UK. They have inspired a full movie universe, the Conjuring universe, the Annabelle movies, the Conjuring movies, La Llorona, The Nun. They have set up the Warren Foundation for paranormal investigators. And they were perceived to have been, by many, the last line of defense in the fight against evil and demonic entities. So, you have to ask a question. Were Ed and Lorraine Warren the real deal? Or were they nothing but scam artists? Were they as perfect as they are pictured in the movies? Or the way they portrayed themselves in the press, in interviews? Both Ed and Lorraine Warren have passed on, so we may never get a definitive answer. But the following cases and the research that I've done into them may just prove and expose Ed and Lorraine Warren for being the biggest scammers in the paranormal field. None of this is conjecture, none of this is me just being horrible for the sake of being horrible. I took a great interest in Ed and Lorraine Warren's career. I've watched the stuff with Tony Shapiro. I watched the stuff with the Haunted Collector. And back before I started to see so many holes in the paranormal. So I'm going to go through 3 of the cases, the most famous cases, and why they're probably not anywhere near as true as we've been led to believe. And then I'm going to top it all off with the projected image we have of the Warrens and what has been documented in 2017. So number 1, and probably the most famous case until the Conjuring movies, the Amityville Horror, or the Amityville case. I think without argument, this is the most infamous of their cases. It's the case that built their reputation. So, to cut the story short, George and Kathy Lutz move into a home, and shortly after, all hell breaks loose if you listen to their stories. And you know the story because there has been a movie and a remake, and then I don't know how many sequels and reboots. There's a lot out there. None of them are that great. The original and the remake are pretty decent, but everything else about the Amityville Horror is a bit trash. So the history before the Lutz family move in that plays into the apparent haunting involves the DeFeos and the son basically working his way room to room and shooting his family dead. And after the event, he basically claimed that voices in the home and spirits in the home made him do it. And this was obviously quite a powerful story because of the remakes, the movies, the books, the sequels. But where did Ed and Lorraine Warren fit in? Well, after the Lutz family run away from the house, they fled after 6 weeks, the Lutz family invited the press and psychic researchers into the home to prove this story. And of course, in with this, Ed and Lorraine Warren turned up, where Lorraine claimed that the house was possessed by many demons. These claims by Lorraine landed the Warrens' TV spots, parts in movies, radio shows, talk shows. It turned the Warrens into a paranormal celebrity couple. The Lutz family also released a book covering the haunting, but years later admitted that most of the book was sensationalized and exaggerated, even going as far as to say as some of the stories were made up over 4 bottles of wine and a discussion in which they said the words, "just make it scary." This admission then throws doubt onto Ed and Lorraine's claims of demonic possessions of the home. But wait, didn't DeFeo claim the voices and spirits made him kill his family? Well, yeah, he did. Until a few years ago, where he admitted that he lied about the voices and everything associated with it to try and get an insanity plea to lower his sentence for the deaths. So does this make Ed and Lorraine Warren liars? Not really. Yes and no. While they haven't directly lied about what was in the home, they were going off information fed to them. To be psychic and to be a demonologist and to not pick up on the lie. The whole thing from beginning to end was just built on lies and undermines the entire Amityville case. Number 2, Annabelle. Creepy looking doll. So, it's probably fair to say that the Annabelle doll is probably the most famous cursed item in the world right now. And no, it doesn't look like the creepy, horrible thing that's in the movies. It's a Raggedy Ann doll. A simple Raggedy Ann doll. I mean, if it did look like that original doll, who the hell would make that, buy that, or give that to a child to play with? And which child, in their right mind, would play with that thing? It is hideous. And let's be fair, Raggedy Ann dolls are about as scary as a bunny skipping through an open field in the spring with a rainbow above it. I don't know where that came from. So, the story is the doll was given to a nursing student in the 70s. I think it was 1970. And the doll began to move, and it scared the nursing student and her housemates or roommates. So they call in a medium, and the medium claims that the doll had been possessed by the spirit of a woman called Annabelle Higgins. And the student and the roommates felt sorry for the spirit of Annabelle Higgins and offered it to live in the doll and to live with them. And shortly after, it all goes horribly wrong. So the doll's sinister nature escalates. And it escalated to a point where the student actually throws the doll out in the trash, or the bin, only for them to come home and find that the doll was in fact back in the apartment. Ooh, spooky. And so the students call in Ed and Lorraine Warren. And Ed and Lorraine Warren remove the doll and place it in the what is now their haunted museum. So Lorraine claims the doll is possessed by a demon. They remove it. They make it the focal point of their cursed museum, the cursed artifacts. And this is something that is missing from the movies, something that is omitted. There's no documentation of any kind for this doll, its history, or the people involved in it prior to the Warrens. This doll just appears with a story, and we only have Ed and Lorraine Warren's word to take for this story. But Beardo, you're so sceptical. That's not enough to go off. You are absolutely correct. That in itself is not enough proof to go off of. The word of Ed and Lorraine Warren only is not enough proof to say, hey, that wasn't real. However, some skeptics took a closer look into the Annabelle case, and guess what they found? The entire Annabelle story bears a striking resemblance to an episode of The Twilight Zone that aired 7 years prior to this doll appearing at the Warrens' home. The episode, you can still find it, is entitled The Living Doll. And in that episode, a mother gives a doll to a daughter. The mother's name is Annabelle. Yeah, it's that on the nose. And in this episode, the doll is thrown away because of the creepy nature of it. And it returns, and it leaves threatening notes to the dad. Ooh, spooky how similar those stories are. Okay, number 3 and the last case I'm going to discuss in this video is The Haunting in Connecticut. Now, there is a fantastic movie called The Haunting in Connecticut. It doesn't feature Ed and Lorraine Warren for some reason. Why would it not feature Ed and Lorraine Warren? It was prior to the Conjuring Universe movies. Maybe the Warrens didn't agree to it. Why wouldn't they agree to it? So, in the late 80s, so the story of The Haunting in Connecticut. In the late 80s, the Snedeker family moved to Connecticut to a large home that they've got for quite cheap because it is close to the hospital where the son has to undergo treatment for cancer. But the home is making the family feel uncomfortable, and the son starts to act strange, aggressive, lashing out. And the family discover there's a good reason behind all this. The home was, in fact, a funeral home for years prior to them renting or buying this house. Things then get worse. The son then starts, and the family starts seeing this entity with long black hair, and it's tormenting the elder son. So the family call in the Warrens. But there's a problem. Before the Warrens are called in, the son is actually diagnosed with schizophrenia. You know what schizophrenia is, where you see and hear things, hallucinations, very strong, powerful hallucinations. It's a life-altering mental health condition. So the Warrens turn up to the home, and they stay for several weeks. They want to get the full demonic feeling. They want to capture as much evidence as they can. They want to get a good feel for what resides at the house, what haunts the house. And then Lorraine Warren makes a rather bold claim. There's not just a demon in the house. The house is full of demonic entities because the funeral owner was practicing necromancy. So Edna Lorraine Warren, to counter this, form an exorcism. And the exorcism works. The house falls silent. Everyone lives happily ever after. The story doesn't quite end there though. While the movie did not feature Edna Lorraine Warren released and published a book. The book is titled In a Dark Place. But the book was co-written by a fictional horror writer, Ray Gardner. But Ray Gardner interviewed the Snedeker family, and through his interviews realised there were discrepancies in the stories. The testimonies were contradicting each other, not adding up. So Ray Gardner did the right thing and took these concerns to Ed Warren. And Ed Warren replied with, "Oh, they're crazy. Don't worry about it, you're only getting part of the story. Use that and just make it scary." Didn't we hear that somebody say that about the original Amityville case? So the last part, and I didn't know if I was actually going to include this last part because Ed and Lorraine Warren have passed and I don't want to be disrespectful, but while it appears that through research they're not everything they said to be, I'm going to highlight some things but not go into detail, and if you want to find that detail yourself, go ahead because it's all out there. So the movies, the Conjuring movies, depict Ed and Lorraine Warren in a very specific way. It's a very wholesome, loving way. It's an amazing love story within a horror universe, something that's quite rare, perhaps the greatest love story told in horror. But this was all orchestrated by Lorraine. She was heavily involved in the original 2 films, and she made some very specific demands in her contract about the way her and her deceased husband Ed would be portrayed. How specific? Well, for examples, the movies were explicitly not allowed to show Ed and Lorraine Warren showing any extramarital relationships. That's a very specific thing to put into a contract without anyone have mentioning it beforehand. Why would that be? Look up the story of the 17-year-old girl Judith that lived with the Warrens. I think she was a babysitter. Look into the story of her pregnancy. It's all a bit dark and I don't want to go into it. But she was living at the Warrens' home when all of this went on. And she also goes into detail about the physical violence that took place in that home between Ed and Lorraine, with Lorraine often being rendered unconscious at the hands of Ed. Now, again, this is just one person's claims against the family, but the pregnancy and the whole horrible story surrounding that's documented. There's more proof of that than there is of any haunting involving Ed and Lorraine Warren. Also take into account that the Perron family have spoken out about the Conjuring movies and the Conjuring house, and, you know, Ed was actually smacked in the face at that property by the father during an exorcism. They're heavily involved in the Conjuring 2, where Ed and Lorraine spend so much time in the UK and they're about to leave the UK, but they turn around and go back to save the family, and none of that happened. What actually happened was they were there for a very short time, basically said it was fake and left, and then a phone call took place later. So the entire third act of that film that involves Ed and Lorraine Warren fighting the nun, spooky, woo, that was a couple of minutes phone call, not a battle with a demonic entity. So, do please let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. I know this is going to rub some people up the wrong way, but, you know, I've done my research and not all is as it seems with Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, I love the Conjuring movies, but I don't view them as a realistic depiction of everything that happened. I view it as a very, very loosely based on a true story. Love the movies. Well, I don't love the third one. It's a bit boring. And why did Lorraine get superpowers in the third one? It's a bit odd there. And the Nun movies, they were shit. The Annabelle movies, 2 of them weren't that great. One of them was scary. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on the comment section down below. Much love to you all. Happy November. We're getting close to Christmas. I'm gonna have to wear a hat and everything. Beardo, out.